This week on ANN, we wrap up our coverage of the 2020 spring meetings.
The North American division earmarks more than $1 million to support Adventist food pantries.
And Adventists in Vanuatu start cleaning up after Tropical Cyclone Harold.
These stories and more coming up.
Thank you so much for joining us this week. We have a few stories to round out our coverage of the 2020 spring meetings.
The spring meeting of the Seventh-day Adventist Church was held and streamed online due to the COVID-19 pandemic that has limited travel and kept most people in their homes.
The novel coronavirus known as COVID-19 has spread globally since the end of 2019. On January 30th, the World Health Organization, or WHO, declared the coronavirus a global health emergency, and on March 11th, the WHO declared COVID-19 a pandemic. At the time of this recording, the virus has infected more than 2.6 million people. There have been more than 182,000 associated deaths and 713,000 recoveries. Those numbers continue to rise rapidly.
Just to recap, spring meeting is one of two annual gatherings of the Adventist Church's Executive Committee.
The Executive Committee is the second highest governing body of the Seventh-day Adventist Church after the General Conference session, which occurs every 5 years.
In between sessions, the Executive Committee has the authority to act on behalf of the General Conference in session.
That's right. It has the power to appoint committees, employ personnel, elect or remove administrators, and effect the retirement of an elected or appointed position before the expiration of the term for which they have been elected.
During spring meeting, the Executive Committee receives the audited financial reports of the General Conference and transacts regular Executive Committee business.
You may view the archived discussions online at executivecommittee.adventist.org.
In his presentation during the 2020 spring meetings, Associate Treasurer and Director of Church Investments for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Tim Aka, gave a dire but honest picture of current economic and market trends. The COVID-19 pandemic has created unprecedented issues for the global economy. Many businesses, including factories and restaurants, have been forced to close due to government-imposed lockdowns or curfews. Global supply and demand chains have been severely impacted as nations who source the world with parts and goods have stopped manufacturing and producing. The virus is not the only factor contributing to this turndown, however. Pre-existing conditions in the global economy have set the stage for the crisis that we are now facing. Adding to the growing storm system of economic failure is an increase in debt and consumption. People are all too willing to buy things on credit to maintain their standard of living. Aka noted that in 2017, 78% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck with little to no savings. Unemployment rates in the US alone are expected to rise to 30%, and banks are concerned that the worst wave of mortgage defaults may be coming. In Europe, the forecasts are equally dire, with the GDP drop of minus 15% in the second quarter and as low as minus 6% for the year. Aka warned that the church will feel the impact of this recession at every level of organization. With many members unemployed, he says, it is reasonable to assume a 10% to 20% decline in giving. However, Aka urged that we need to find ways of reaching people and succeeding in this new reality, saying, we need to consider how we not only operate in declining economic realities, but actually thrive in them through our empowered and engaged membership, and that through sacrifice and dedication reaches out to help the world. For more on this story, visit news.adventist.org.
At annual council last fall, the Executive Committee of the Seventh-day Adventist Church approved the strategic plan for the next quinquennium. The new plan, Reach the World, I Will Go, is rooted in the Great Commission, which calls Jesus' followers to go and make disciples of all nations. The details of the plan reflect data collected from Adventist members through several research studies. This information identifies areas that can help Seventh-day Adventists grow spiritually and become more effective in reaching out to the world. The strategic plan was to be officially launched at the General Conference session in Indianapolis, Indiana this summer. However, due to widespread uncertainty surrounding the coronavirus outbreak and safety concerns for delegate travel, GC session has been postponed until May 2021. This has presented a challenge for formally unveiling the new 5-year strategic plan, although divisions and other church entities are already in the process of implementing the main objectives. During the 2020 spring meeting, the Executive Committee discussed how to publicly introduce the new strategic plan. Former General Vice President for the Adventist World Church, Mike Ryan, proposed that July 3rd and 4th, the dates originally planned for the first weekend of the GC session, be used for official launch through various media platforms. His motion was strongly endorsed by the executive committee. Director of the Office of Global Mission, Gary Krause, shared that the inspirational weekend would include testimonies, music, mission stories, a special Sabbath school lesson taught by Mark Finley, and a church sermon by Adventist Church President Ted N.C. Wilson. The Reach the World, I Will Go initiative covers a broad spectrum of church life, but predominantly focuses on the responsibility of individual and corporate mission. There are three main emphases: mission, spiritual growth, and leadership, and 10 objectives with key performance indicators for each category. David Trim, Director of Archives, Statistics, and Research for the Adventist Church, presented the strategic framework and plans for research throughout the next 5 years that will indicate strengths or weaknesses in the system. Church leaders say I Will Go is more than a strategic plan. It is a mission-focused tool based on real data and the Great Commission. Its value will be determined as the church works together as a worldwide team of brothers and sisters under the power of the Holy Spirit. For more information, visit iwillgo2020.org.
One piece of business discussed annually at spring meeting is the Missionary Book of the Year. This year especially, the book gives Adventists a resource to share hope and peace with their friends and neighbors. Publishing director of the Adventist Church, Almir Moroni, outlined the 18-month process it takes to plan for the Book of the Year, including time for writing, editing, and publishing. This year, the publishing department was scheduled to introduce Words of Hope, an abridged version of Christ Objects Lessons by Adventist Church co-founder Ellen G. White, as the potential 2021 Missionary Book of the Year. However, the department changed its course after the COVID-19 pandemic. Mark Finley was invited to write the new volume from scratch, a challenge he promptly accepted. The 8-chapter book is titled Hope for Troubled Times: How to Thrive in a Shattered World. Hope for Troubled Times will be available as an electronic free download, an audiobook, and in Braille. A brief study guide is included at the end of each chapter, as well as links to church ministries such as Adventist World Radio, Hope Channel, and other sites where readers can find additional information about the church.
Adventist Community Services entities around the North American Division, or NAD, continue to provide relief and meet the needs of their community in light of the COVID-19 pandemic.
NAD is committed to supporting the operations of the Adventist Community Services Food Pantry Ministries of the 60 local conferences within the North American territory. To provide that support, the NAD Adventist Community Services is investing $1.5 million and allocating a grant of $25,000 per conference for relief efforts.
In the past 2 decades, NAD Adventist Community Services has established 1,358 centers in the division. Most of these centers provide provisional services, especially food from food pantries. The current funds are earmarked to secure foods and provide personal protective equipment for volunteers.
Food banks have limited supplies due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's not easy for Adventist Community Services pantry ministries to obtain donated foodstuffs. This is causing a strain on the centers that continue to serve and support families and individuals who are facing even more challenges due to this crisis.
In some locations, volunteers need protective gear, currently in short supply, to assist at centers. Since these volunteers are committed to continue serving, there is a greater need to protect and keep them safe. The centers have encountered additional costs related to safety items, such as gloves, masks, and more.
Director of the NAD Adventist Community Services, Sung Kwan, says, "We must keep everyone in our thoughts and prayers as we journey through this tribulation together, giving and receiving grace in our dealings with our families, our volunteers, our community, and the world. ACS remains resolute that as we go forward, we will continue to take protective measures for all, but especially our vulnerable and elderly church members and the ACS volunteers. Despite the COVID-19 unprecedented interruption, I am grateful for our church members and ACS volunteers, continually active in serving their communities."
Coming up, Adventist members in Russia make masks for hospital workers.
But up next, we talk to a former General Vice President of the Seventh-day Adventist Church about how you can get involved with the Adventist Church's strategic plan, I Will Go.
Welcome back.
As we reported a few minutes ago, I Will Go is the Adventist Church's strategic plan for the next 5 years.
So, what does that mean for our church members and pastors? We talked to former General Vice President of the Adventist Church, Mike Ryan, to find out.
Hi, Elder Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us on ANN today.
It's a privilege to be here.
Thank you. We have a few questions for you about I Will Go. So this is the new strategic plan for the quinquennium. I Will Go. What does it mean to have a strategic plan?
Well, a strategic plan is a way to have the church become more effective and more efficient in the use of its resources. And it lets us work together as a team rather than everyone working in silos. And so I see a lot of advantages to having a strategic plan. And of course, that's why companies, governments, big organizations, they all have a strategic plan. And it's for the benefits that come from it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. So who can participate in this new strategic plan?
Well, all people can participate in this. And when you take a look at the strategic plan, it really breaks into three great themes. One is the theme of my own personal spiritual renewal. A second theme is the theme of mission. We look at the big cities, we look at the unentered areas of the world, people groups, and very quickly, data tells us that there are places that we do better, and there's other places that we almost have no presence at all. And then a third area is leadership. Leadership development. And of course, leadership development touches everyone from pastors to healthcare workers to teachers to, and most important of all is the leadership training, the initiatives that are put forth by our lay people. And our lay people represent a tremendous resource to the church because they have capabilities, not just in theology and healthcare, but you find everybody from engineers to attorneys to and people who work in the most important jobs of all, and that's the jobs that interface with people. And so leadership training is huge. So you have these three big categories, and when you look at them, those categories, there are objectives that we're interested in, and the data tells us that there's some areas in these three areas that we do very well. But there are other areas that we need to make up ground, and there are some needs in the church, and so we express the direction that we want to go, the improvement that we want to make in what we call KPIs. And you can go online on the I Will Go website, and you can find the entire plan, including the KPIs. Well, what are KPIs? KPIs are called key performance indicators. Who can become involved? Everybody. Look at those KPIs. Pick one. Find a place that fits your gifts.
So finally, what do you dream the outcome of this new strategic plan will be?
Obviously, if Jesus came tomorrow, I'd be happy to throw the plan out the window. But I think we are a church that believes in the future that the Bible describes. Well, what future is it? I like to believe that we are a church that will go through time until the moment Jesus comes. Not only will we go through time, but the Bible tells us that there is going to be a huge harvest. The people are eagerly looking for hope. They want to grasp something of eternal value. And if that is the future that we know is coming, my hope for this plan is that we will see the data change a little bit. We know that probably there's about 38% of the church that would become involved in some type of activity that would communicate spiritual values to their neighbors. Even more alarming is that about 26% would be willing or are involved in community service type activities. Now you would think that that would be 75% of the people. but that's one of the lowest. Well, we haven't got time for that. We're working. We're going to church. I'm running this. I'm too busy, what have you. And we passed by our neighbor who is on the side of the road, and we're on our way to Jericho. So my hope would be that we would take time to become involved in this, that we would see that in participation rise from 28%, 38%, a little over 50% in Bible study. We would see those numbers go up. There would become an urgency that would come over the church, that people would begin to recognize that, hey, this plan's my main business. What we're doing here on earth is temporary. My permanent, long, forever and ever, centuries future is in heaven. And I want to arrive there with those that I've had a chance to share hope in Christ with. And so my hope for this plan we would see a tremendous improvement in the involvement of people in the mission of the church. And if we see that, I think the Holy Spirit will bless that, and that we will be ready for that huge harvest we know that is coming into the church at the end of time. We are living at the end of time. And no better time than right now to have this interview when the world is locked down in a pandemic, and you see the financial markets going through the floor, and where you have a very uncertain future. Revelation 6 comes to mind when you can't find anybody that has the right answer. And people are asking, am I going to be able to stand through this? This church has hope. Let's become part of it.
Wow, great. Thank you so much for all this really helpful information on I Will Go and for being with us today.
Good. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. As the United States government now recognizes the Baltimore and Washington, D.C. region as an emerging COVID-19 hotspot, Adventist Healthcare continues to prepare to be part of the global response. Adventist Healthcare has been working closely with the U.S. state of Maryland to coordinate additional capacity to care for COVID-19 patients. Adventist Healthcare is adding 178 beds across the organization's 3 acute care hospitals. Additionally, 200 temporary beds will be added at the former Washington Adventist Hospital in Tacoma Park, Maryland, for patients recovering from COVID-19. The newest hospital to join Adventist Healthcare, Fort Washington Medical Center, is serving areas in the state that have been deeply impacted by COVID-19. To handle increased hospitalizations, Fort Washington has opened Maryland's first medical surgical field hospital to provide care for COVID-19 patients. The hospital will add additional temporary care units over the coming weeks. The healthcare system is also lending its support by ways of infrastructure, staffing, and supplies to Howard University Hospital in Washington, D.C.
The cleanup and recovery effort is continuing for South Pacific communities left devastated by Tropical Cyclone Harold. The Category 5 cyclone cut a path of destruction through the Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Fiji, and Tonga, leaving thousands of people homeless, cutting power and water supplies, and flooding villages. Worst affected was Vanuatu, where the cyclone caused extensive damage to the northern part of the country after making landfall on April 6th. Many Adventists were among those left homeless. Vanuatu Mission President Nas Terry Mailalong said churches and schools have been lost, and hundreds of church members lost their homes. Aori Adventist Academy, a major high school in the country, is almost completely destroyed. All of Aori's 7 staff houses were also smashed. The Adventist primary school at Sarakata lost its roof, and an address staff house was flattened. Cyclone Harold formed as a tropical low between Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands on April 1st. It struck the Solomons as a Category 2 system, destroying houses, buildings, and food crops. ADRA is working with local authorities in Vanuatu, Solomon Islands, and Fiji, and with the Tongan Mission Office to assist those affected. Food and shelter are the main needs. Mailalong said Vanuatu has now been hit by 3 major disasters. There is the impact of the threat of COVID-19. Plenty of working-class citizens are losing their jobs. In the Tafea province in the southern part of the country, ashes falling from the volcanoes and affecting the livelihoods of the people, destroying food crops and contaminating the water source. And then, of course, Cyclone Harold devastated the northern part of the country. Only the Lord will see his people through these difficult times.
Volunteers from the Adventist Church of Nizhny Novgorod, Russia, joined the Masks Project. The plan is to distribute 6,000 masks throughout the city and the region.
In total, the Adventist Development and Relief Agency plans to produce 70,000 masks and distribute them in the country. The masks are intended for medical personnel, as well as for people over 60 years old.
Project volunteers are professional seamstresses and work while in self-isolation. Once ready, the masks are disinfected and packaged.
To date, more than 3,000 masks have been manufactured and distributed.
Coming up, David Trim is here with This Week in Adventist History.
But up next, Adventist Mission has a story about ADRA's feeding initiative in Mozambique.
Welcome back.
In Mozambique, the chronic malnutrition rates are really soaring.
The school feeding initiative, funded by ADRA International, helps feed children and is making a difference.
Adventist Mission has more.
This kind of project was actually created by the government because they need to scale up nutrition, and there is a need in Mozambique. Right now, the chronic malnutrition rates are really soaring. They are above 40%. And this is generally across the country, although there are certain places where it's higher. In Maputo also, they discovered that it's above 30%, which also includes districts like Bowani. So that's why we feel like it's important that the students should get also part of the meal because they might not be getting enough. Being part of this project, they receive rice. The rice comes in a packet with soy and dehydrated vegetables. And inside each packet, there is a multivitamin packet within the food that we distribute. So every time they get a ration size, which is almost equivalent to a 700 kilocalorie in supplement to what they get from home. When we started the project, we did some anthropometry where we were weighing the height and the weight of the students, and we analyzed it. And then we discovered that 50% of the students were really underweight. That was last year. And we are going to consequently weigh the students. Right now, we designed a cohort that we would follow up each month so that we have concrete results to see the changes that are okay. What we have noted so far has been an increase in the number of students. We started with 9,366. Right now we have 13,453 students. And last year when we ended, we had 11,656 students.
Watch this and other mission stories online by visiting adventistmission.org, then click on videos at the top.
And finally, for today's episode, let's turn to David Trim for a look at Adventist history.
This week, David Trim looks at the life of an Adventist evangelist who, as a young man, met the Soviet dictator Stalin.
Welcome to This Week in Adventist History. On April 18 in 1890, Maria L. Huntley died in Battle Creek, Michigan. Born in New Hampshire in 1848, Maria helped to found the New England Tract and Missionary Society and became its first secretary. This grew into the General Tract and Missionary Society with constituent state societies across the United States, which powered what was then known as home missionary work. From 1882 to 1901, the International Tract and Missionary Society was then one of the chief engines of early Adventist mission outside the United States. Maria, who you see here, was secretary of the General Tract and Missionary Society from 1876 to 1884. while also serving from 1880 to 1883 as Secretary-Treasurer of the Health and Temperance Association, forerunner of today's Health Ministries Department. Maria was also an educator. From 1882 through 1889, she taught first at South Lancaster Academy, then at Healdsburg College, and then at Battle Creek College in Michigan. In 1889, when the church established The Home Missionary magazine, Maria was chosen as its founding editor. Tragically, she then contracted cancer and, just 41 years old, passed away. On April 23, 1895, Konstantin Davidovich Kalashvili was born in Sokoba, Georgia, then part of the Russian Empire. In 1911, so the story goes, Yosef Djugashvili, another young Georgian, visited the Karalashvili home, where he saw the text of Daniel 2, verses 44 and 45 written on the wall. Yosef is said to have grabbed Constantine's Bible and boasted, "By these hands we will establish paradise on this earth." Yosef Djugashvili later adopted the name Stalin and from 1934 to 1953 was dictator of the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, in the early 1920s, Constantine had fled communism, becoming one of many refugees from the Soviet Union in China, where he became an Adventist. From 1925, he worked first as a Bible worker and then a successful evangelist in China, mostly in Russian expatriate communities. In 1950, he and his wife Irina fled communism for a second time, and in 1952 were resettled in Australia, where Constantine organized and built a Russian church in Brisbane, Queensland. Constantine Karalashvili died on 1st July 1974 in Sydney, Australia, aged 79. That was this week in Adventist history.
Thanks for watching ANN. Join us next week for more news from around the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Please remain safe and well as we face this new reality together.
Remember that each of you can be pillars of hope and peace in your communities. Look for ways to help each other.
Yes. Remember to continually pray for each other, look out for each other, and lift each other up.
And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Adventist News and on Facebook.com/Adventist News. You can reach us at ANNvideo11@gmail.com.
Before we say goodbye, here's some good news from the book of 2 Timothy, chapter 1, verse 7.
And the passage says, "For the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline."
That's our program for this week. And remember, you can always visit news.adventist.org for daily news and videos. Until next time, God bless.
Take care.